Let's talk about something that most people miss when it comes to cheating, especially when women cheat. See, we've been conditioned to believe that infidelity is mostly about sex. The stereotype is always that men cheat because of temptation, lust, opportunity. But for women, it's different. When a woman cheats, it's almost never just about the physical. It's about emotional fulfillment, or more accurately, the lack of it. When a woman feels emotionally disconnected in her relationship, when she feels like she's invisible, unheard, or unappreciated, she becomes vulnerable. Not weak, not wrong, not dramatic, vulnerable. And vulnerability doesn't mean she goes out hunting for an affair. No, it usually starts much quieter than that. It starts with a moment, a conversation, someone noticing her, someone asking how she's doing and really meaning it, someone who looks at her like she matters. That emotional connection can become intoxicating when it's been missing from her relationship for too long. And that's the key. Women cheat more often with someone who gives them what they're not getting at home. And what they're not getting isn't usually sex. It's validation, affection, attention, emotional intimacy. And here's the scary part, it often doesn't look like cheating at first. It looks like friendship, it looks like harmless texts, a quick lunch, a "you look beautiful today" from someone who notices the small things her partner hasn't commented on in months. That's how it starts. She may not even realize what's happening until she finds herself emotionally invested. Suddenly, this other person is in her head. She's thinking about him more than she should. She's comparing. And even if nothing physical has happened yet, in many ways, she's already crossed a line. Now, her emotional energy is no longer with the person she's supposed to be building a future with. It's with the person who made her feel alive again. Now, here's what most people get wrong. They think cheating is just a betrayal of the relationship. But for women, it's often the result of a betrayal that already happened inside the relationship. She didn't just wake up one day and decide to cheat. She was already feeling alone, already carrying the weight of being the one who tries, the one who cares, the one who reaches out, only to feel like she's the only one emotionally invested. And when someone comes along who gives her what she's been craving, presence, conversation, curiosity, emotional safety, it becomes incredibly hard to resist, because it's not about getting something new, it's about getting something back, a piece of herself she lost along the way. The irony is, the partner who's being cheated on may not even notice what they've been neglecting. They may think everything is fine because the routine is being followed, the bills are paid, the dinners are made, the weekends are full, but they've stopped checking in, stopped listening, stopped appreciating. And in the quiet spaces of that neglect, someone else found their way in. This isn't about excusing cheating. It's not about saying it's okay to hurt someone because you felt unloved. Cheating is still a choice, but it's a choice that's often made long after the emotional affair has already started. And that's why it catches so many people off guard. Because it doesn't always start with lust. It starts with loneliness. And loneliness in a relationship is one of the most painful forms of isolation there is, because you're supposed to be loved, you're supposed to be held, you're supposed to feel safe. When you don't, everything outside the relationship starts to look better than it is. That's why the most dangerous man in a woman's life isn't always the guy at the bar who flirts with her. It's the one who listens when her partner doesn't. The one who asks how her day was and stays present when she answers. The one who makes her feel like a priority instead of an afterthought. And if she's emotionally starved, even the smallest gesture can feel like a feast. So what do we learn from this? That maintaining emotional connection isn't optional. It's essential. You don't get to stop dating your partner just because you're in a relationship. You don't get to stop noticing, complimenting, appreciating. Those aren't luxuries, they're survival skills. Because if you're not feeding the emotional bond in your relationship, someone else might. And it might not be because she's a bad person. It might be because she felt invisible for too long. And the moment someone made her feel seen again, she followed that feeling because she missed herself in the mirror of someone else's eyes. If you're not meeting her emotional needs, someone else eventually will. When people talk about cheating, they often picture some stranger, a random one-night stand, a wild night out, something spontaneous and impulsive. But for most women, it doesn't happen like that. In fact, when women cheat, it's rarely with a stranger. It's not some mystery man who appears out of nowhere and sweeps her off her feet. It's almost always someone she already knows. Like she's giving more than she's getting for far too long. You see, relationships run on a kind of emotional currency. And when someone is constantly investing, giving attention, affection, effort, time, and getting little to nothing back, they don't just feel unappreciated. They start to feel invisible. They start to feel like they're carrying the relationship alone. And when the imbalance goes on for too long, they begin to ask themselves the most dangerous question in any relationship. What am I still doing here? It doesn't usually start as a desire to leave. In fact, most of the time, women in that space want the relationship to work. They're still holding on, still hoping something will shift, still trying to get their partner to see them, hear them, meet them half. But when that doesn't happen, when she keeps showing up and it feels like no one's meeting her there, it wears her down. And when that imbalance becomes the norm, she starts to lose the emotional resilience to keep giving without receiving. And here's where people get it twisted. They think cheating is about sex. But when a woman cheats, it's often about the message underneath the act. It's about what she's not getting. It's about the silence after she shares how she feels and gets no response. It's about the constant emotional labor she's doing, trying to hold things together while her partner assumes everything is fine. It's about being tired of being the only one noticing the problems. She cheats, not because she's reckless, but because she's run out of reasons to believe that staying loyal will change anything. And that's where the imbalance hits hardest, because she's often the one who tried the longest, the one who asked for more, the one who stayed up talking, writing messages that explained exactly what she needed, hoping something would land, when it doesn't. When it just keeps going the same way. Eventually something in her snaps. And no, it doesn't mean she doesn't care, but it means she's stopped expecting things to get better. So what happens next? Someone shows up and offers balance. Maybe not in life, but in presence, in emotional energy. And it doesn't even have to be dramatic. Just a conversation where she doesn't feel like she has to explain herself. A moment where someone laughs at her jokes, compliments her ideas, or asks her how she's really feeling. And in that moment, she feels the scale tip, because now she's getting something back. It's not always about finding something bigger. It's about finding something fair, something that feels like mutual effort, mutual interest, mutual value. And when that shows up, especially after she's felt emotionally bankrupt for so long, it feels like finally being paid back for everything she's been giving without return. That's where cheating can begin, not in lust, but in longing, in relief. Now, this doesn't make it right, but it makes it human, because we're not designed to keep loving without feeling loved. We can try, and many people do, but over time, the gap between effort and reward creates resentment, it creates numbness, and it creates openings for someone else to step in, not because they're a better person, but because they're simply present. A woman doesn't cheat because she wants someone else. She cheats because she stopped believing that her partner would ever show up for her the way she needed. And when she no longer feels emotionally safe or valued, even small moments of attention from someone else can feel massive. You might think, well, if she was unhappy, why didn't she just leave? But leaving isn't always easy, because she remembers the good moments. She remembers what it could be. She still hopes it will change. And if she's deeply loyal, she may stay far beyond the point where she's emotionally fulfilled. But emotional depletion doesn't just go away because you're committed. In fact, the longer it goes unaddressed, the deeper it roots itself. And once she crosses that threshold, cheating may feel like the first time in a long time that she chose herself. The truth is, imbalance in a relationship doesn't just cause distance, it creates risk. The risk that someone else will meet her in the places you've left empty. The risk that your inaction becomes someone else's opportunity. Because when you don't show up, someone else will. Someone close, someone who's been around. And that's what makes it so dangerous. It could be a coworker, a friend, someone in her social circle. Maybe it's someone her partner has met, someone he doesn't think twice about. The risk doesn't always come from outside the house. It often walks straight through the front door with a smile and familiarity. And that familiarity, that's the foundation. That's where it all begins. Because when you already know someone, when there's history, shared jokes, mutual trust, the guard is down. It doesn't feel like a threat. It feels safe. And that's the exact moment vulnerability creeps in. Because when something feels safe, we don't see the risk. The dynamic begins to shift subtly. It starts with innocent conversations, a deeper connection that begins to form over time. And unlike with a stranger, she doesn't have to work to build that trust. It's already there. And when she's not getting the emotional nourishment she needs from her partner, that closeness starts to look like an oasis in the middle of an emotional desert. This person, let's call him the friend. He knows her. Maybe they've worked together for years. Maybe they've confided in each other through difficult moments. Maybe they've joked about how well they get along. And here's the thing, he listens. He remembers things. He follows up. He notices the small changes, the way her tone changes when she's stressed, the way she lights up when she talks about something she loves, the way her voice drops when she talks about how tired she is, how unseen she feels. He fills in the emotional gaps, not all at once, but little by little. And the relationship begins to shift from casual to connected. And all of a sudden, she's sharing more with him than she does with her partner. Not just surface stuff, but real things. Deep things, her frustrations, her dreams, her sadness, her laughter. And with every word exchanged, the line between friendship and something more becomes thinner. Now you might be thinking, but if she's in a committed relationship, why wouldn't she stop it before it crosses that line? And that's the trap, because it doesn't feel like a betrayal in the beginning. It feels like support. It feels like understanding. It feels like having someone in her corner. And when a woman feels emotionally isolated at home, that kind of support can become addictive. What people forget is that cheating isn't just about physical betrayal, it's about emotional displacement. When she starts going to someone else for connection, comfort, laughter, intimacy, she's already taken the first step. And when that person is someone familiar, someone safe, someone she trusts, the likelihood of crossing that line only increases. Not because she's evil or immoral, but because emotional needs don't disappear just because you're in a relationship. If anything, those needs grow louder when they're not being met. Let's also be honest about this. It's much easier to open up to someone who doesn't carry the same emotional baggage as the person you're in a relationship with. The friend isn't the one who forgot your birthday or dismissed your feelings last week or left their emotional presence at the door months ago. The friend isn't complicated. He's fresh. He's simple. He doesn't argue with you over the dishwasher or the finances. And so in comparison, he seems perfect. And that illusion can be incredibly tempting when the reality of your relationship feels heavy. And it's not just the emotional contrast, it's the accessibility. That's why so many affairs happen close to home. Women cheat more often with people they have consistent, safe access to, people who are part of their daily life. That's why it just happened isn't always a lie. It's the result of emotional buildup that was never acknowledged or addressed. This is why we can't underestimate the importance of guarding the emotional intimacy in a relationship. If you're not emotionally present, someone else might slide into that space without even trying. They don't have to be better looking, more successful, or even more charming. They just have to be more attentive, more consistent, more emotionally available. The reality is women rarely leap, they drift. And they drift towards someone they already trust, someone who on the surface seems harmless. That's why the most threatening person isn't the attractive stranger at the bar. It's the guy she already texts every day, the guy who's already in her phone, the guy who's already in her life. If you think the danger is always out there, you won't see it when it's standing right next to her. One of the biggest myths people believe about cheating is that it just happens out of the blue, that it's this sudden, reckless decision made in a moment of weakness. But for a lot of women, it's not impulsive, it's a buildup. A long, slow process of disappointment, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. And often, Cheating is not the beginning of the problem. It's the byproduct of a pattern, one where she's been feeling. We're living in a different world now, a world where women are more confident, more independent, and more in touch with what they want than ever before. They're not waiting around for permission to feel fulfilled. They're not afraid to ask for what they deserve. And because of that, they're also far less likely to stay in situations that drain them. That empowerment is beautiful, but it also comes with a shift in how women approach relationships, and a shift in what they're willing to tolerate. That's why when a woman cheats, it's often not about escape. It's not about chaos or impulsiveness. It's about seeking out something she's no longer willing to live without, something she may have outgrown trying to beg for. She cheats with someone who gives her what she's been missing, not because she wants to betray her partner, but because deep down, she feels betrayed by the fact that she had to look outside her relationship to feel seen again. And when a woman is standing in her power, when she knows what she brings to the table, she's no longer satisfied with crumbs. She's not fooled by routine or convenience. If she's showing up with love, loyalty, and effort, and she's met with indifference, distance, or emotional laziness, that gap doesn't stay quiet for long. That's where the risk begins, because she may start to believe that being wanted, appreciated, and chosen shouldn't have to be something she fights for every day. She doesn't cheat with just anyone. She cheats with someone who reflects back to her the value she already knows she has, someone who reminds her of how vibrant, interesting, and worthy she is. And when that person comes along and mirrors back the version of herself she misses, the one who felt alive, confident, playful, it becomes incredibly hard to ignore. Sometimes we underestimate how much people evolve in relationships. And if one person keeps growing while the other stays stagnant, that gap can become emotionally suffocating. If she's leveling up in her life, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, but the relationship is stuck in a loop of complacency, that disconnect begins to chip away at her attraction, her patience, her belief that things will get better. Empowered women don't stay in places that make them feel small. They don't keep quiet forever. And when they start to feel like they're shrinking in a relationship, they don't always walk away right away, but their heart starts wandering long before their feet do. And here's the thing, in this new age of emotional intelligence, women are seeking depth. They don't just want a partner, they want presence. They want to feel emotionally supported, mentally stimulated, and physically desired. If those needs aren't met, they don't blame themselves. They recognize that something's missing. And if the relationship isn't growing with them, they'll look for someone who meets them where they are now, not who they were 5 years ago. So when a woman cheats, it's often not because she's looking for something new. It's because she's no longer willing to accept something old that no longer fits. She cheats with someone who sees her now, not who she used to be. Someone who isn't coasting on the comfort of history, but is genuinely present in the moment, paying attention to who she's becoming, not just who she's always been. The man she cheats with doesn't always have more money, more charm, or more status, but he offers emotional freshness, curiosity, appreciation. And when you've been starved of those things, they become powerful. He compliments her not because he's trying to seduce her, but because he's actually noticing. He asks questions not because he's trying to get something, but because he's genuinely interested. And that alone can be more seductive than any physical gesture. We often assume cheating means something is wrong with the person doing it, but often it means something has been wrong in the relationship for a long time and no one had the courage to call it out. Or one person tried but stopped trying after being ignored. Empowered women don't cheat because they're careless. They cheat when they've reached the point where they realize their worth and decide they're no longer going to chase someone who's forgotten it. You have to keep showing up, not just with love, but with effort, not just with loyalty, but with intention. Because the truth is, if you take someone for granted long enough, they'll stop asking to be seen. And when that happens, they won't always walk away with a fight. They'll just quietly start giving their attention to someone who makes them feel like a priority again. In today's world, women aren't afraid to choose themselves. And if you're not willing to meet her where she is, someone else will. There's a part of cheating that people don't talk about enough, the emotional progression. Not just the betrayal, not just the physical act, but the inner journey that leads up to it. Because when a woman cheats, it's not just about desire or disloyalty. It's about how she's been feeling for a long time leading up to that moment. Cheating for her is rarely spontaneous. It's layered, it's emotional, and it often follows a very specific path, a path filled with unmet needs, slow disconnection, and moments where she starts questioning everything. One of the most overlooked truths is that many women cheat after they've already emotionally checked out. Their body may still be in the relationship, but their heart has been gone for a while. And that distance doesn't show up all at once. It begins quietly. Maybe she starts talking less. Maybe she stops initiating affection. Maybe she stops trying to fix the problems because she's exhausted from being the only one who ever seems to care enough to bring them up. At some point, she stops believing that anything she says will be heard. That's when she begins retreating, not to punish, but to protect. When someone emotionally checks out, they don't always even realize they're doing it at first, but there comes a moment when they stop feeling safe to be vulnerable. And when that emotional safety disappears, connection breaks down. That's when resentment creeps in. That's when loneliness starts to grow, even if they're still sharing a bed every night. And in that emotional silence, someone else may begin to speak a different language. Maybe someone starts noticing the things her partner doesn't. Maybe someone listens when she speaks instead of brushing off her feelings. Maybe someone looks at her like she's magic again. That doesn't just feel flowering. It feels like oxygen after holding her breath for too long. This is where emotional cheating often starts. Not with touch, but with attention. Not with attraction, but with relief. And when a woman's been starved of emotional intimacy, a little bit of presence feels like a lot. It's not about being swept off her feet. It's about finally being grounded by someone who sees her, who values her, who makes her feel like a person again, not just a function in the relationship, someone who makes her feel emotionally alive. Now, none of this excuses cheating, but understanding it matters, because people don't just wake up one day and destroy their relationship for no reason. There's usually a trail, and when you trace it back, you'll find the moments that could have been different, the conversations that didn't happen, the nights where she cried silently next to someone who didn't even notice, the weeks where she felt like a roommate, not a partner, the parts of her that she silenced because expressing them felt pointless. We're often so quick to point fingers when cheating happens, but the emotional breakdown started long before the physical betrayal. And this is what I mean when I say that cheating is often the result of emotional neglect. Because it's not just about being faithful in action, it's about being faithful in effort, in presence, in care. The partner who stops showing up, who stops listening, who stops being curious, often doesn't realize the slow damage that's happening. They assume that because she hasn't left, everything is okay. But people don't always leave the moment they feel unhappy. Sometimes they stay and hope, and sometimes they stay too long until the hope runs dry. That's when the heart starts drifting toward the first place it feels warmth again. You can love someone and still lose them if you make them feel like they're alone in the relationship. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. It's a series of actions that say, I still see you and you still matter. When those actions disappear, when the effort dies, something else always takes its place, either resentment or someone else's attention. That's the part that hurts the most for the person being cheated on. They thought everything was fine. They didn't see it coming. But just because someone didn't see it doesn't mean it wasn't happening, because a relationship doesn't fall apart in one night. It unravels over time. And if you're not paying attention, you won't realize how far someone has drifted until they're already gone. So if you want to protect a relationship, you have to stay emotionally involved. You have to show up when it's inconvenient. You have to ask how she's really doing and then actually listen to the answer. You have to make her feel like she's still a priority, not just part of your routine. Because when someone stops feeling chosen, they start looking for someone who will choose them, even if it's in the wrong way. The truth is, people don't cheat when they're happy. They cheat when they've been quietly hurting for so long that cheating feels like the first time they've been hurt. A lot of people assume that when a woman cheats, it means she never loved her partner, that it was all fake, that she must have been emotionally detached the whole time. But that's not always true. Sometimes women cheat not because they stop loving their partner, but because they stop recognizing themselves in the relationship. And that loss of self can be just as painful, if not more, than losing the relationship itself. Over time, if a woman starts to feel like she's fading in a relationship, like she's playing a role more than being her full self, that disconnection doesn't just create distance from her partner, it creates distance from herself. She starts to forget the version of her that used to light up, the version that laughed more, dreamed more, felt more alive. And when the relationship becomes a space where she no longer feels that spark, where she feels boxed in or constantly overlooked, cheating can feel like a desperate attempt to reconnect with that lost version of herself. It's not always about the other person, it's about what they bring out of her, what they remind her she used to be. Someone spontaneous, flirty, funny, someone who is admired, someone who could feel deeply, express freely, and didn't have to mute parts of herself to keep the peace. And when someone new enters her life and taps into those dormant parts, it can feel like she's being reintroduced to herself. That can be intoxicating. So cheating becomes less about betrayal and more about rediscovery, a reclaiming of something that's been missing, not just in the relationship, but inside her. Maybe she didn't even realize how numb she had become. Maybe she thought the burnout she felt was normal. But then someone smiles at her in a way that lights her up, or asks her a question that goes deeper than surface level, or touches her in a way that makes her remember she's still desirable. And just like that, he's awake again. That's not about selfishness. That's about starvation, emotional starvation, identity starvation. Starving to feel like more than just someone's partner, someone's mum, someone's support system, wanting to feel like her again, wanting to be seen, not just in function, but in essence, wanting to be desired, not just out of habit, but with intentional passion. And here's what most people don't understand. A woman can love someone deeply and still feel invisible in the relationship. She can want things to work. She can stay loyal for years. She can try everything to fix the cracks. But if she feels like she has to give up who she is in order to maintain the relationship, eventually her sense of self-preservation kicks in. She might not leave, but she'll start seeking herself outside of it. Sometimes that looks like a new hobby, a new job, a new passion, but sometimes it looks like a new connection, one that reflects her back to herself in a way she hasn't felt in a long time. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a message, a moment, a lingering look, a conversation that goes a little too deep. She may not even intend for anything to happen, but when she feels more like herself in that moment than she does in her own relationship, it triggers something powerful. It becomes a mirror, showing her the emotional gaps she's been ignoring, the joy she's been suppressing, the passion she's been missing. And in that moment, cheating doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like discovery. It feels like remembering who she was before she dimmed her light to make the relationship easier. Now, this doesn't justify betrayal, but it explains how people get there. Because when someone forgets who they are and then someone comes along and helps them remember, it can feel like salvation, especially if they've been operating on emotional autopilot for so long. It's not that she doesn't care, it's that she's finally feeling something again, something real, something alive, something her. And that's the paradox of it. Cheating in this context isn't always about leaving someone else. Sometimes it's about trying to come home to yourself, trying to feel again, trying to escape the version of you that the relationship has slowly made you become, quiet, resentful, numb, trying to breathe again after holding your breath for too long. So when people ask, how could she do that if she loved him? The answer isn't black and white, because sometimes love isn't the thing that keeps you. Sometimes it's the very thing that makes it harder. She stayed because she loved. She tried because she loved. But when love turns into self-abandonment, when being loyal starts costing her her own identity, something eventually has to give. At the end of the day, people don't cheat because they want chaos. They cheat because they're searching for a part of themselves they lost somewhere along the way.